All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're looking at something truly fascinating. We're exploring the exact intersection where art, biology, and human psychology all collide. For anyone who's ever tried to learn a new skill, especially a physical one, that journey from being a clumsy beginner to an effortless master can feel like an absolutely unsolvable puzzle. But when it comes to the human voice, well, that puzzle's in a league of its own. Today, we're unraveling a pretty major vocal mystery by digging into David C. Taylor's groundbreaking 1908 treatise on voice culture. It's called The Psychology of Singing. And let me tell you, Taylor completely flipped the script on how we understand vocal training. The insights he shared over a century ago are incredibly relevant to how we learn just about anything today. So, right off the bat, we have to ask, why is the voice the most difficult instrument to master? It's a really fascinating central paradox. Think about it. If you hand a student a violin or seat them at a piano, the path forward is pretty clear. Assuming they have a bit of talent and actually put in the work, if they practice the mechanical techniques, they're eventually going to master the instrument. Practice makes perfect, right? But the human voice is a glaring exception to this rule. As our source material points out, there are countless cases where a vocal student practices technical exercises for years, literally years, and yet never achieves technical perfection. With the voice, mere repetition just isn't enough. If your vocal organs aren't handled in a very specific, almost elusive kind of way during practice, no amount of mechanical drilling is going to turn you into a master singer. And because of this, you get this incredibly sharp disconnect between the master and the student. On one hand, you have the master singer. When you watch a consummate vocal artist perform, their expression is spontaneous. It's free. It looks completely effortless, right? There is zero evidence of them calculating their next move. But then, look at the other side. Look at the vocal student. Their reality is often this rigid, agonizing mechanical struggle. They're sitting there consciously trying to manage microscopic throat muscles, obsessing over these super strict breath control rules, and calculating every little physical twitch. So the big question is, how on earth does a student cross that chasm? How do they go from agonizing mechanical calculation to completely free, spontaneous expression? To answer that, we're pulling back the curtain on Taylor's controversial 1908 academic text. Taylor looked at the state of vocal training at the turn of the 20th century, and he made a remarkably bold claim. He said that modern vocal science had completely, utterly misunderstood how humans actually learn to sing. He argued that the scientific community had become so obsessed with the mechanics of the throat that they completely ignored the mind. So let's get into Section 1, the Old Italian Method and the Age of Empirical Singing. Now, before we can really understand Taylor's critique of vocal science, we need to trace the evolution of voice culture. We got to go back to the Golden Era, a time long before medical science and anatomy charts totally took over the singing studio. Picture this. It's the year 1600, and we see the birth of Italian opera. Alongside it, this brand new art of solo singing bursts onto the scene. A race of legendary singing masters sprang up in Italy, and they were discovering incredible new beauties and powers in the human voice. This era, stretching from 1600 to around 1750, was the absolute golden age of the old Italian school. They just passed their methods down from teacher to student. By 1723, we see the first published work on the subject by a master named Tossi. But then, as we move toward 1855, something monumental happens. The laryngoscope is invented, and this marks the exact pivot point where vocal training dramatically shifted from being an imitation-based art to a mechanical science. But hold on, before that massive scientific shift, how did those old Italian masters actually teach? Well, they relied on what we call traditional precepts. Phrases like sing on the breath, open the throat, sing the tone forward, or support the tone. Now, to a modern scientist, these phrases are incredibly vague. They don't tell you which muscle to flex or what specific cartilage to move. And yet, the old masters used these very precepts to train generations of the most legendary, agile singers in history. The secret? They didn't use anatomy. They used an empirical method based entirely on attentive listening, imitation, and focusing on the sheer quality of the tone. Which brings us right to Section 2, the rise of vocal science. So what happened to this highly successful intuitive method? Well, in 1855, humanity gained a pretty amazing new technological power, but we perhaps lost some of our artistic soul in the process. A brilliant vocal teacher named Manuel Garcia invented the laryngoscopy. For the very first time in human history, we could literally look down a singer's throat and watch the vocal cords vibrate in real time. It was a massive medical breakthrough, but in the singing studio, it caused absolute chaos. The vocal world became instantly obsessed with anatomy, mechanics, and highly rigid breath control systems. Those old empirical methods of simply listening and imitating tossed right out the window. Instead, teachers started demanding that their students observe and consciously control their microscopic throat muscles. And that takes us into Section 3, the mechanical fallacy. See, Taylor looked at the decades of vocal training that followed Garcia's invention, and he made this radical assertion. This new scientific, mechanical approach to voice culture was fundamentally flawed. And honestly, the sheer contradiction of these scientific theories perfectly illustrates why. Take two of the major mechanical breathing theories of the 19th century. On one hand, you have opposed muscular action. This theory basically demanded that students expel breath powerfully, but at the same time hold it back using their inspiratory muscles so they didn't strain the vocal cords. It sounds like exhausting physical labor, right? Then, on the other hand, you have the breath band system. This completely opposite theory told students to hold the air back and use their false vocal cords as an automatic valve, often initiating the tone with a harsh glottic stroke. Now, both systems claimed to be the absolute scientific truth. Both demanded intense, conscious, muscular control. And as Taylor so perfectly points out, they couldn't both be right. In fact, he argued they were both completely wrong. The real problem wasn't just the contradicting rules, though. It was the core philosophy behind them. The central mechanical theory of the era dictated that the voice requires direct, conscious management of its muscular operations during a performance. Think about how paralyzing that accepted wisdom actually is. It meant that to sing beautifully, you had to consciously manage your diaphragm, your ribs, and your totally invisible throat muscles, all while trying to create deeply moving art. I absolutely love how Taylor illustrates the absurdity of this. Listen to this quote for a second. Siegfried does not forge his sword and at the same time think of his diaphragm. Lucia cannot attend to the movements of her arytenoid cartilages while pouring out the trills and runs of her mad scene. It's brilliant. He's pointing out that peak artistic performance and conscious anatomical management are entirely incompatible. You literally cannot pour pure emotion into a song if your brain is hyper-focused on your arytenoid cartilages. It just doesn't work. To connect this directly back to our own lives, overthinking singing mechanics is exactly like overthinking riding a bicycle. Imagine you're speeding down a hill on a bike, and suddenly you start consciously calculating the exact tension in your quadriceps, the angle of your calves, and the grip strength of your fingers. What happens? You crash. You fall right over. Complex physical actions rely on a baseline level of automatic, subconscious coordination. By forcing singers to consciously control what should be automatic, vocal science was actually inducing throat tension and totally ruining voices. So, what is the fix? Let's look at Section 4, the psychological solution. If the scientific mechanical method is a fallacy that leads to tension and crashes, what's the way forward? Well, Taylor's elegant, simple answer to the chaos was a return to the roots, but with a psychological understanding of why those roots worked. He heavily championed the empirical method. This is a system based on attentive listening, imitation, and trusting the body's instinctive obedience to sound, rather than trying to use conscious anatomical control. He realized the true secret to voice culture isn't found by dissecting the throat with a laryngoscope. It's found in the mind, and it is found in the ear. Let's break down how Taylor's psychological resolution actually works in practice. First, you know that dreaded throat stiffness that plagues so many singers? It's directly caused by the attempt to consciously manage the vocal mechanics. The harder you try to control it, the stiffer it gets. Second, under normal conditions, the voice instinctively obeys the commands of the ear. If you hear a perfect tone clearly in your mind, your vocal organs will naturally align to produce it without your conscious interference. And because of that, we get to the third point. Imitation is the rational foundation of voice culture. Students shouldn't be staring at anatomy charts. They should listen to great master singers, absorb the pure quality of the tone, and simply rely on their imitative faculty. Tone quality, not muscle management, should be what guides the singer. And that brings us to our final takeaway and a question I really want to leave you with today. Whether you are learning to sing, playing a new instrument, or honestly mastering any complex skill in your life, are you trying to mechanically manage your skills, or are you trusting your instincts? Taylor's century-old explainer is this brilliant reminder that sometimes overanalyzing the mechanics is exactly what's holding us back. Sometimes you really just need to listen, imagine the perfect outcome, and let your body do what it was naturally built to do. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the psychology of singing. Keep learning, and hey, keep trusting those instincts.